Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all today. I just wanted to say that panel before is fantastic. It really showed that the old true saying, if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office, holds true with all these incredible different stories. So I was quite fortunate as I helped co-found RMC. The way I would describe what we do is it's a platform for family offices to co-invest. And so what happened was we went from a small group of families, which was informal and kind of doing deals on napkins without an expectation to grow the way we did. And over the years, with success, we've grown and learned a few things. So now we're about 3 billion, 23 million square feet, and become the largest landlords in certain cities like Kansas and Memphis, and just look for unique opportunities. And so I guess since the theme of the conference is the new economy, we should take it in that direction. And it just kind of reminds me of, it's kind of like the old economy, which I was talked about by my parents when they were explaining when they were getting mortgages, they would lock them in when they had 15% interest rates because interest rates used to be very high. And so in my lifetime, I've never really experienced that. So it is kind of the new economy for me now. But it kind of showed, I think, what family offices have as their advantages versus a lot of funds and other institutional players is that they don't need to be smarter than everyone else. They just don't have to do a lot of the crazy things everyone else has to do. So the way to be able to think in a long term is a major advantage, I would say, for families compared to institutions and other players. And so what we did is we created a platform where every deal is direct. And essentially, there's an advantage because you're never a forced buyer or you're a forced seller. We really took the model of the Canadian pensions, actually, that figured out a long time ago that if you can go direct with certain programs, it is a much more economical way to be able to take advantage of opportunities. And so I would say at our heart, families should be opportunistic. And often to be opportunistic and deep value, one has to have a contrarian mindset. And so in order to think about new economies, I always go back to the old economies. And so my business partner, Ray Massa, that's the RM of RMC. He started back in the mid-'80s. And that was a very interesting time where there was high interest rates with inflations and a major crisis with the savings and loans crisis, what happened in Texas and regional banks before they consolidated into national banks. And what happened was essentially that there was a big crisis and the RTC, Resolution Trust Corporation, had to get created and prevent the systemic risk from spreading. And eventually, as these bad banks they would have to unwind. And some crazy Canadians went to Texas with the idea that the opportunity would be unique. And it was an interesting time when, they were able to acquire doors in Arlington at like $20,000, $30,000. And so what happened was something really stood out in Ray's mind. And it's not what he saw, it's what he didn't see. And it's what drives me and his son today as a family business, thinking generationally. What we didn't see was what we call the smart money of the funds, the institutions, people you would think would want to buy things that are incredibly cheap. He didn't understand why, so he asked his older partner, shouldn't we be worried if the smart people aren't here? And the partner said something very elegant, which was to shut up, because eventually they come. And so what often happens is opportunities are not presented by everyone being there, but it's by their absence. I guess Ben Graham and Warren Buffett explain it well, where they say, in the short term, the market can be a voting machine. So obviously AI, we're seeing that being quite expensive and probably worth it, but crypto, other things can be, day in, day out change. But in the long term, it's a weighing machine, and things like PE ratios, cap rates, fundamentals are important. And so he didn't understand it at that point. And so he just asked his partner, and the partner said, when capital comes, often opportunities can disappear because pricing gets bid up. So as families, one of the major advantages that you have is the ability to think long term. Traders generally will try to think in less than seconds. These days, it's unbelievable how much can be done with computers. Analysts will try to think out in quarters. Funds might go 5 or 10 years. But families are generational, and that's very important because all the problems that we're dealing with these days are generational. And so a lot of the speakers today were talking about the new economy, how things are changing, with onshoring versus offshoring. And of course, the flip side is as hard as it is to rebuild, these things always create opportunities for those that are nimble and those that are willing to put capital in for long-term opportunities. And so that was a good example where, buying doors in a crisis paid off, and eventually Sam Zell, the late Sam Zell, Equity Residential, bought those assets. And where I came from, Quebec, in the mid-90s, we had our own situation with referendums. And again, capital is very mobile in the world, and capital left. And the Bank of Montreal, I don't know if you know, is in Toronto. But that's also when we decided we should buy in Quebec, because no one wanted to do that. And we were able to build up a nice portfolio, and eventually sold that. And then obviously you might have noticed the last 4 years have been quite unprecedented with a pandemic, where the first time since the Spanish flu for 100 years, we faced a global situation where economies shut down. And that was actually, if one took the opportunity, a great chance to deploy long-term capital. And then the Fed, doing what they did to prevent the systemic risk, flooded the market. And then we saw something that hasn't happened in my lifetime, which was inflation going up to almost double digits. And that really changed, what we perceive as, the economy for long-term plannings. And so rates have done nothing but gone up, over the last couple of years, 500 basis points. And nobody knew whether that was going to be short-term or long-term. And now, in a way, the bond market is doing the Fed's job, because the long-term rates are going up, implying that this is not transitory, and we could be in this situation for a long time. And so this has, of course, presented a lot of challenges for many of the private equity models and those that rely on cheaper debt. But the flip side is that it creates opportunities for those that are able to deploy in the right areas. And so private credit, I think Howard Marks was saying, is just going to be an unbelievable opportunity where you can get equity-like returns, maybe with not necessarily taking on the equity risk. And so essentially what we really saw from the panels before is that every family is unique in their perspectives. Every different member has different goals and objectives, but the ability to communicate and work in structures that is opportunistic can really present unique opportunities. And so we're fortunate to be in Florida, where they were able to attract a lot of businesses. And so the opportunities in this state, what you're seeing is just enormous, because business is, again, mobile. And a lot of companies, Jeff Bezos recently, Ken Griffin before, are relocating. So we've set up some businesses. We bought the Bank of America Tower in Jacksonville, did some bars and restaurants in Miami. And so when one doesn't have to think kind of in quarters and what might or might not happen, but could think about long-term trends, really, I think the best advantage that the families could do is they could think, what is going to happen with my kids? And if you think about it from that perspective, there's great opportunities. There's also enormous problems with what's happening, obviously, geopolitically, from climate change. But all of these are going to have solutions, and all the solutions will obviously provide economic opportunities. And so with the families that we've grown with, there's about 200 in Canada, 200 in the US, 200 offshore. We just learned that if we work together, it gives us opportunities that wouldn't be available in more institutional kind of setups. And so I would encourage, with that mindset, to be able to think in a generational way for this new economy, because it's definitely going to have its challenges. There's no question. But I think the flip side is going to be, there's going to be unbelievable opportunities for those that are nimble, and those that can act with decisive ability, and those that can think generationally. So that's all I wanted to do in a lightning talk. It doesn't give me a lot of time, but that was kind of my take with working with the families that we work with globally, and looking forward to chatting with any of you if it's of interest on your families or families that you know and work with as well. So thank you very much. I can see the time winding down, and it was a pleasure and an honor. Thank you, Nicolas, for the event, and thank you for all the organizers and workers involved. Have a great rest of the conference.